time when I did my how to improve from 800 video, a lot of you said that you were rated 900, 1000, 1100 and that you were too good for that video. Well, today everybody, I'm going to be focusing on every single one of you that is rated under 1200, and I'm going to be playing a couple of 5+5 blitz games against people that are rated in that rating to tell you exactly what it is that they're doing wrong and what you can do right to beat them. So, I'm going to go ahead and start the first game, and here we go. I'm playing with the white pieces. Now, I wouldn't recommend this playing 5+5 games if you're in this rating, as I think it's a lot better to play longer games where you really have the time to think through each move. But for the sake of the video, I'll play blitz games. Now, I'm going to play a London, and this is actually one of the openings that I really recommend for people in this rating range because it's really easy to understand where you're going to put your pieces. And it's very easy to remember, right? So I definitely think that you shouldn't know too much theory here because it can complicate things, but you should know how you want to set up your pieces in the beginning of the game and how you want to develop them, and maybe know a little bit of some opening that you like. So just like I mentioned in the other video, you want to develop quickly, get your bishops and knights out quickly. You want to, take as much center as possible, and you want to castle, and then you want to get your queen out. You don't want to get your queen out too early on. All of those things still apply to you, who's rated under 1200. But obviously, at this level, you've probably improved a little bit from that, and you already know this, and you can build forward. So, bishop f5, I'm going to go ahead and get my knight out. We're just going to develop everything. Now, I don't know why my opponent took so long before or during a move, but so now bishop d6. Now, in this position, I think that many of us would actually not realize that it's not really that bad for black to take this bishop, because if black captures this bishop, we will be able to capture back with the pawn, and we will be holding the center really, really, really nicely. So we actually don't need to waste the tempo bringing the bishop back or anything like that. Actually, we can just focus on developing. So instead of doing anything strange, I'm just going to go ahead and develop my knight over here. Now, one of the things that I think is super important at this rating range is to sort of understand where you want to put your pieces. When you're rated 500, it doesn't really matter if you go knight c3 or knight d2. And maybe even here, it doesn't matter. But what is really important is that if you make a lot of inaccuracies in this level, I think that is what's going to take you down. Because most people don't, blunder a rook or blunder a queen in one move at this level. Most people just make inaccuracies. Or, forget a tactic when there's a lot of things that are being threatened or things like that. And these are the things that you need to try to avoid. So the reason why knight d2 is so much better than knight c3 is because this knight over here is allowing for this c-pawn to be able to push. So here, for instance, because I decided to go for this pawn structure, I'm going to be going c3 to be able to defend my pawn with this pawn. Yeah, I don't want to have my knight over here because then I will be blocking this pawn, which is not something I want. So now, before anything, I will go c3. I will defend the pawn. My opponent is castling, and we will go ahead and develop the bishop. Let's see where we go. I think that I just simply want to go to e2. There we go, because I can't go to d3 or anything like that. And I think that another thing at this level is basically understanding pawn structure. So, for instance, now that we have this pawn structure where, we have right now 2 pawn islands, so these 2 pawn islands, I know that to protect this pawn, I will need to go g3. Now, this pawn, a lot of times we say that double pawns are not that great, but actually this pawn is pretty good because it's stopping black from going e5, which is a very typical pawn break in these sort of positions when black tries to get a little bit more space and break the center by trying to exchange, the central pawns. Now, this move is not possible anymore because we have our pawn on f4. So the way that black will have to play this is by going at some point c5. This will be the way of breaking the center. So what I will do is that I know that this is the move that the black wants to make, and it's fine that black makes it, but um, what I'm gonna do actually is that I'm gonna go ahead and put this knight on b3 to stop black from doing the only pawn break that they can do. So I'm gonna try to limit sort of, what moves black can do. And I think that by doing that, it annoys your opponent a lot. So like for instance, now black could go knight e4 or whatever, but this knight is actually really not doing that much. I can also go knight e5 pretty soon, and very soon we are gonna go ahead and castle. Now I did this move just to stop c5 from being played. So you see, now my opponent is going b6 to go c5 with the exact same idea, because that is the plan he has. But now we can see that he is kind of weakening a little bit the light squares, and this square right here might become a bit of a weakness. So the move that I'm going to do here is that I'm not going to care too much about this right now. I'm just going to go ahead and place my knight in the center. Now, if this knight captures here, we're going to capture there, and then we're stopping c5. So my opponent goes for c5 immediately. Now, in this position, I'm going to go ahead and start looking at tactics. Why? Because we are now in a position where pretty much we're gone from the opening. I mean, yes, I should castle. I really should castle soon, and I will castle soon. But because we can castle the next move, it's not like our king is very unsafe, because we're just one move away from castling. No. So we're, kind of in the middle game right now. So in this position, because we can see that there's a lot of pieces that can be captured, this knight, this pawn, I mean, there's a lot of pieces that are right now threatening different pieces. This is a moment where we should go ahead and think. And when we think, we always follow the method of checks, captures, and attacks. I went more in depth into that in another video, but you should always think about it. What checks, captures, and attacks do I have in that specific order? Now, like I said, typically you would have a 20 or 15 or 20-minute game, and then you would also have time to think about what checks, captures, and attacks your opponent has, which is equally important, and you should always think about that before each move. But because we don't have that time right now, I will not do it, but that's really like one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give. So in this position, I am saying that there might be ideas of going g4, g5, because if I do this, I mean, at some point I might be able to capture here and then capture here, but truth is that I don't want to go through and destroy my whole position just to win a pawn. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So what other things am I seeing here? Well, I am seeing that if I capture here once and then the pawn captures back, well, then if the pawn pushes here, I will get this really beautiful square for my knight. So I think that I'm actually going to go ahead and capture this pawn, because now I will get this really good square for my knight if my knight was ever kicked out away from b3. This is a great square, because if we would have a position where the black pawn is over c4, then yeah, this would be a great square. Now my opponent captured with the knight, and I'm immediately going to put my knight on d4, because this is just such a fantastic square. There is right now no pawn that can kick away the knight from here, and it's almost like an outpost, pretty much. I mean, this pawn is the only one that in the future could kick it away, but because we have this pawn on f4, we're going to be stopping the pawn from doing that. So we right now have a really good knight, and like I was talking and saying before, we always want to try to find the best pieces, or the best square for our pieces. Now, a good square is where a piece is very useful. Over here, we can see that both of our knights are in the center. Typically, you want to have your knights in the center. Both of my knights are in the center, but not only that, they're being really useful. They have a lot of squares to go to. So let's go ahead and see. What else do we want to do? Well, I am pretty happy with how my knight is over here. And to be honest, I am seeing that there might be these sort of plans of maybe like trying to attack the queen. But before anything, I'm just going to castle, because castling is super important in chess, and we want to castle as soon as possible. So now that I've dealt with the whole position and I'm happy with how it is, I'll castle. Okay, so now opponent is trying to exchange this knight for this one. Now my knight is quite a lot better, but what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go knight c6 actually, and I'm going to threaten this queen. The reason for that is that if they're not careful, we might have some good check over here that could become a little bit annoying for our opponent. So The other idea is that if queen over here, my plan is actually to perhaps go b4, and I'm not entirely sure if I want to do this, but I just want to kick away this knight because there's a lot of different tactics. But okay, now my opponent went for something very different, and I'm going to go for b4 immediately. The idea is simply that this knight doesn't have a lot of squares to go to. So if knight captures over here, well, then I can actually just capture with the pawn, I think. Yes, I can capture with the pawn, and boom, I'm winning a piece. Like I was saying before, a lot of times people don't do one move blunders, but over here I'm threatening two pieces at the same time, and my opponent did not take the time to calculate what happens if I capture here. Well, I capture back, and I'm threatening right now the queen, and I'm threatening the knight, and there is no way of defending both pieces at the same time. So what is happening? I am winning a piece. All right, so what could my opponent have done to avoid it? Well, they could have gone through the checks, captures, and attacks, right? Because then after they analyzed the capture, they would have seen, okay, my knight is right now under attack. Okay, so when she captures back, what happens then? My queen is under attack. Oh no, two pieces are under attack at the same time, which is bad. So that is what my opponent could have done. And obviously, you should practice tactics, and there's a lot of different things that you can do for that, in terms of puzzles, in terms of a bunch of different things. But tactical vision is still, I think, really important here. I mean, it's always, but at this level, I think that many wins are from being better at tactics. Okay, so now we are a piece up and we're very happy. So I'm gonna go ahead and kick away this queen again because, well, the queen cannot go back to the diagonal, which is actually where he would like to be. And if my opponent's not careful and goes something like queen f5, I know that I have this check over here, this little fork, that would be amazing. So, okay, queen goes over there, and I don't really like my knight over here actually, so I am gonna go for this check. The reason I'm going for this check is because my knight on c6 is not too great, and to be honest, when we are a piece up, we want to exchange as many pieces as possible because our opponent is going to have less pieces to defend with if they don't have that, if they have less pieces than us. So I'm just trying to exchange right now. If they take with this pawn, well, then I might be able to go rook f3 and try to put my rook on the same file as the queen and the king. And if they capture with this pawn, well, then this pawn might become a weakness. But before anything, we're going to keep everything safe. This pawn was under attack by two pieces. We're going to defend it. And all of a sudden, this queen is pretty much trapped. I mean, the queen really does not have a lot of places to go to, which is really great. So I don't really want to take there, but this pawn is also under attack. So I'm going to go queen d2, and I'm going to go ahead and defend. I don't want to take here because then this pawn right here might become a bit of a weakness. Now, I know it looks scary to open up like this, and maybe I could have taken with the rook. Like I said, because we want to exchange pieces, but it's okay because my king can go to h1, and because we have a light squared bishop, my king will always be safe in this diagonal, so I'm not really worried about my king not being safe. And soon I'm going to go bishop g4, gotta be careful of course, but soon I'll go bishop g4, and I'll just try to exchange as many pieces as I can. It's going to be really hard for black to enter the position, but I'm constantly trying to keep my pieces together. I don't know if this is something that you guys have realized, but constantly one thing that I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to make sure that my pieces are not too loose. I want to move together with my pieces. So let's see, I'm going to go bishop g4, and then I'm going to place my queen somewhere over here. Okay, maybe if rook takes over there, I'll start by capturing here, but I want to try to make sure that my pieces are not too loose and that they're all coordinating together. If now, for instance, queen g6 trying to pin over here, then I'll put my queen, I'll stop the pin, and I will protect everything. So I will not give any counterplay to my opponent. I will go now queen g3, and now I'm defending everything. So I'm constantly trying to not give counterplay to my opponent. Now, probably in this position, my opponent should go queen h3. That's probably the best move. And then I might go queen h6, and then I'll probably go queen h3 just to try to exchange queens. Because if I'm able to exchange queens, I know that I'll be winning because I have a piece more. I'm a bishop up. So the endgames should all be winning, as long as I don't lose too many pawns, but we're not going to let that happen. So now queen here, okay. Now I'll go ahead and capture the pawn. I'm not scared. So here, let's go ahead and see what is happening. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and capture here. Like I said, I'm not scared of yeah, I'm not scared of exchanging. And here, actually, I believe that I have a tactic. I believe that, can I do it? Might be a little bit scary, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go ahead and take here. And the idea is that if takes here, I'll be able to take the rook. And yeah, I'll simply win an exchange, which would be really good. So instead, my opponent is doing this move, and I will go back over here. The idea simply being, once again, that if takes, I can take the rook back. Now, after this move, I can go for rook over here. I'm defending everything. I'm threatening the queen, and I'm keeping everything very nice and safe. And I'm constantly making sure that there is no rook d4, so I'm trying to keep my pieces together. So now I'm going to place my bishop over here on h3, just trying to control everything. I'm threatening a checkmate. My opponent is not missing the checkmate, but now I will go ahead and exchange because I just want to keep things simple. So now we'll take back. And I'm just exchanging, like I said, because I know that I'll be winning. So pawn over here. Okay, I can capture the pawn. Is there any queen check right now? No, there is no queen check that would make me lose my very dear bishop. So I will not be scared of it. I will simply now block with the queen. And I'm constantly going to make sure that there's no way that, if I would have gone king g2, for instance, there would have been a queen check and I would have lost my bishop. So really important to try to keep all your pieces together. Now, my opponent in this position gave me their queen, but they also blundered checkmate. So I will go for the checkmate instead. But key things to take from this game. In the beginning, I developed in a nice and normal way. I didn't do anything crazy. I just developed my pieces. After that, I try to make sure that my pieces were in their best squares possible. I try to get my knights to some good squares, making my opponent's mobility a little bit harder. And after that, I just try to make sure that I didn't fall for any tactics. My opponent, after a while, when the position became a little bit more complicated, miscalculated a capture and lost a piece. And because I was always calculating everything, I was able to see it. In the end game, just try to make sure to always keep my pieces together, to not, blunder any check or anything. Always have my king, my queen, my bishop all working together and exchange a lot of pieces so that, it becomes easier for me to win, as my opponent will not have enough pieces to attack with or create anything. So those are the things to take from this game. We are now going to go for one more game, and we're playing now with the black pieces. And my opponent is going for d4. Now here, I typically sometimes play the Nimzo Indian, but all that kind of stuff I think can be pretty complicated. So I would just recommend going d4, d5, or saying c4, the queen's gambit, and I will just go ahead and protect my pawn. So this is actually something that I play a lot as well. I think that this is good. You just develop and you just, try to hold on to your center. Bishop is right now going over here. No problem. I will stop the pin. I don't want you to pin my knight. It's going to become too complicated. Over here, all right, we'll go c6. And now we have the little triangle over here defending this d5 pawn. Now I will castle because our king needs to be in safety. And the moment that this bishop moves, I'm not sure the bishop is going to move now, but the moment this bishop moves, I will capture here. I'm not doing it yet because if I capture here, then the opponent will be able to bring the bishop out without losing any move, right? If the bishop goes first to d3 and I then capture, then my opponent will have lost the move of bishop d3. It will have been pointless because the bishop ended up going to c4 anyway. So I'm waiting for the bishop to do that simply because in these sort of positions, a lot of times white tries to play for the center, tries to play e4, and black plays a little bit more for the queen side. But now the position changed. My opponent decided to take over here. Now, here we can take with typically, we should only take with these pawns. We don't really want to take with the knight because then white might be able to go e4 at some point. First maybe taking care of this, but then going e4 and white will get a really nice center. So we don't want to have pieces in the center. We want to have pawns, okay? So, unless we have like a really nicely placed knight or whatever, but in general, like the way we control with the center is with pawns. So we can take with either a c pawn or we can take with the e pawn. Now, a lot of times we say that, you should take towards the center, but Actually, because this knight is placed on d7 and not on c6, we actually want to capture with this pawn because we also want to open up for this bishop. So it wouldn't really make sense for us to take with this pawn because then this bishop would not be able to get out. And once again, we want to try to get our pieces to the best squares possible, to the squares where they're most useful. We don't want to trap our bishop. We don't want to take with this pawn and have this pawn like this and make this bishop trapped. No, we want to free it. So I'm seeing right now that the queen and the bishop, they're both looking towards h7. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to move the pawn, one, to get air in the endgame so that, my king is never in a back rank, but also so that there's never anything where if I move this knight, there is bishop takes h7. So I'm just keeping it nice and safe. Okay, next goal right now is that I want to get this bishop out. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try to find the best square for this knight because this knight does not have a good placement right now. So where would I want to go with this knight? Well, let's see. For instance, placing a knight on c5 might be pretty great, but obviously I can't because there is right now this pawn, and I don't really want to go c5, I think, right now because I think that this pawn might become a little bit weak, so I'm not really happy with that. So actually, what I'm going to do, I think, is that I'm going to start by placing this rook over here on e8, and I'm actually maybe going to go knight f8, and then I'm going to get this bishop out. Because I want to put this bishop somewhere over here, and I don't really want to go to b6 because this knight over here actually doesn't really have a future. I mean, we don't want to go knight c4, I think, because if takes and takes, I would lose the control of the center, and guys, center is crucial, so I don't really want to do that. So it might be that I want to go knight f8, and then I want to get, this bishop out somewhere, and then and then play from that. So actually, I think that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go knight f8. And these positions, I think, can be like really hard to play a lot of times. Like they kind of like feel very complicated and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think that the most important thing is just to understand that you should constantly try to put your pieces in the best square possible. Okay, guys, so I spent a little bit of time thinking here because I really wanted to make sure that I came up with a good plan. My opponent has been playing well, and this is a very solid position. But the things that are happening here is that our pieces are definitely not as good as our opponent's pieces. This knight over here is really strong. So what we want to do is that we want to exchange. We want to get rid of this knight, right? So I also want to develop this bishop at the same time. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go knight g4. And with this move, if the knight captures, then we'll be able to capture over here. And now he captured over here. There was this bishop that was hanging as well. So we will capture back with the queen. And the idea is that if f4, and then this pawn was hanging, so it wasn't possible. And now we're finally able to get all our pieces out, develop, and I think that this is a good way of exchanging my opponent's good pieces for our bad. So this bishop is not that good placed, but actually another idea of going knight f8 is to be able to go bishop h5 and then bishop g6 and just place this bishop in this diagonal. So that is actually another idea over here. Now our opponent is going e4, and even though a lot of times this is the way that, white wants to play by creating this break in the center, this pawn is now going to become a big weakness. And I think a lot of times at this level, people forget, how important pawn structures are. And now that we have this isolated pawn to play against, which is basically a pawn that doesn't have any other pawn that can defend it, there's no c-pawn, there's no e-pawn. Now that this is an isolated pawn, it's going to be really easy for us to play against this pawn, and it's going to be hard for white to defend it, especially because we've gone with this pawn to c6, and we're stopping now the pawn from ever going over here. So I would say that we now actually are better. Now I'm going to go ahead and place this knight on e6. We're threatening this pawn, and I think that we have a clear advantage now because our opponent decided to go e4 in a position where, it simply worsened their pawn structure. Guys, always think about your pawn structures. I definitely think it's a really big thing. So in this position, my opponent went rook e1. Now, I could probably take this pawn. I definitely probably could. But for the simplicity of it, I'm not going to do it because I really don't like the idea of having the queen in the same file as my opponent's rook. I really don't like it. So I'm going to go for a move that is a little bit simpler. I'm going to go queen d7. The idea is that it's impossible to defend this pawn, so I'll capture it next move, but I will not give my opponent any chances of counterplay. And this is something that I like to do because, you know, when you're playing chess, you should think that you're playing against a really strong opponent. I'm not going to think that, oh, my opponent might miss something. No. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm not giving them any chances of counterplay. Now, we could capture with the pawn, or we could capture with the queen. I'm actually going to go ahead and capture. Let's see. I think I'm going to capture with the queen. I do really like my queen and my rook here together. And I actually don't want to create an isolated pawn for myself. I mean, taking with the pawn might have been good, opening up this file, but maybe this pawn could have become a bit of a weakness. This is one of the biggest mistakes that not one of the biggest mistakes, but this sort of move is a mistake that I've seen a lot of 1200 people do. Just a lot of people in general. The move where where I'm attacking my opponent's piece, but instead of defending it, they're attacking one of my pieces. Now, the reason why I'm saying that this is a mistake is because sometimes it can be good, but most of the times these moves are way too complicated for this level, and you shouldn't do them because all of a sudden my opponent messed up their pawn structure even more. They went from having a really nice pawn structure in general to, you know, having a pawn structure where they have some double pawns. This is just a worse position than before, but a lot of times I feel like people want to do it because it might look a little bit fancy, or it might make you feel a little bit like, you know, a better chess player or whatever. Like, and this is another move. I don't know. I think, yeah, they just blunder the knight here. I think that they didn't realize that, you know, after takes there is this, but always things to think about. And now my opponent blundered another fork. It's all going down. A lot of times when you make one mistake, you make several mistakes in a row, and we end up winning the game. So what did my opponent do wrong? Well, my opponent played this really well in the opening. They knew their opening, they knew where they were putting their pieces, and I actually had at one point to take a think and say, okay, how am I really going to move my pieces? But I was able to figure out a plan to get my pieces to the best squares possible, exchange their active pieces for my passive pieces, like when I went knight g4 and then was able to get my bishop out. And then later on, they didn't really realize how their pawn structure should be. They decided to break the center, maybe because a principle is to break the center, but you shouldn't do that if you leave one of your other pawns behind. For instance, in this game, their isolated pawn became very weak. I was able to win it. I won a pawn, and when they were frustrated about that, they started to, instead of, you know, just defending their pieces or whatever, they started to try to go for tactical things where they're attacking one of my pieces, but it just made their position worse. A lot of times the simplest moves are the best ones to do. You shouldn't overcomplicate chess. It's complicated enough, you know? And then, yeah, I just went down with tactics such as knight f6, just not working, and then falling for this. So if you're gonna go for a move where you're literally like sacrificing a knight, like for instance here, you know that, you know, I can capture the knight back, you need to spend a good time thinking about what are the consequences of this and really calculate it, and not just make a move because you have the feeling that it might be good. No, you should calculate it, always following the method of checks, captures, and attacks. I would also, guys, recommend all of you to really analyze your games. Every single game that you play, look through it with an engine and, you know, look through the points where you messed up, because a lot of times you'll see a pattern. You'll see where in the game you're messing up, and that will help you a lot with improving. I still think that tactics are the main thing at this level that makes one win or lose, but obviously at this level, less people do one-move blunders, and you really need to be able to see, you know, like maybe 2 or 3-move tactics, and there's a lot of ways of practicing them, for instance with puzzles. So I would say those are the main things. I hope that you found this video instructive. Let me know in the comments down below if you go ahead and play a game now, how it goes. And thank you so much for watching the video, everybody. Let me know also if you want me to do this for an under 1600, you know, for people under 1600. All right, take lots of care, people. I'll see you all in the next video.